I've been working in the tipped wage industry for several years. For as long as I can remember, I've been working. Not as long as I can remember. But yeah, no, my first job with the break of the military, and my first job was I was in a restaurant, tips job, and so yeah, I've been working for tips, in different jobs here and there, pretty much all my working life, even up till today. And so today at work, the tip dynamic that I work in now is that I've been working in for several years is competitive. Like, sure, waiting tables is competitive to a certain degree, but this is competitive in the way where we have all these deliveries going out, and there's anywhere from 6 to 10 delivery drivers on a shift, and we're able to see the tips on the orders as they're made, and there are there's orders that have tips and orders that don't, then orders that vary in tips and stuff. So there's high tip orders and small tip orders, all the whole range. So and it is there is a kind of a standardized structure of the way the order that the drivers who route themselves. We don't have a dispatcher for our drivers. The drivers dispatch themselves on their orders. And so there's a standardized way that it's supposed to be done, but it's always worked upon. You know what I mean? One way or another by different drivers, just because. And the way that it's the standardized way that we're supposed to deliver it is that our delivery map is divided into 4 quadrants. If you can imagine, picture it, our map is separated into four quadrants, and so a driver who, depending on his first order, that ought to be in kind of an order in the way that they came as best as we can, based off of that first order, it dictates your quadrant, with slight exceptions. And so if you take 2 or 3 more orders, kind of down the line, they are supposed to be in your quadrant. If there's like 8 or 10 orders in your quadrant, just so happens to be, which that doesn't often happen. Yes, it is asked that the driver take maybe half of them, take 4 of them, and leave another 4 for another driver to go into that quadrant also. You see, so anyways, there is a structured thing. But over the years, I've been working here at this particular restaurant since 2017, and we've had a lot of different drivers have come through, and we did have a dispatcher or management dispatching for small periods of time, through and throughout. So I actually have the experience of both ways and stuff. But anyways, so you can imagine just how kind of competitive, and how when a new driver comes, sometimes it'd be, they wouldn't last very long, just because especially here in the last few years, seems to have gotten a lot more cutthroat, if I can use that term, a lot more snake pity, and understandably so, with the economy and everyone, and everyone kind of feeling it. It stands to reason that competitive tipped work will be an area where just the first little bits of ugliness, kind of come, where you're really up against, the potentially ugly parts of human nature, and and things like that. So, but the point of this is that I said I've been working for this since 2017, and so I, for a large portion of my walk of what I of being in the way, as I made a video about the first part of a video about that, about the way, find the narrow way, the other day. But anyways, so I've worked at this job. The other job I've had several jobs actually in this time, in the period that I would, that I became a Christian, and that I was just to use simple terms, serious about laying hold of the promises. And so and being transformed, not just the promises, but being transformed, is that is part of the promise. But yeah. So anyways, not to belabor that point, but so early on in my walk, I began learning about Reformed doctrine, Puritan, just reading certain books, like I mentioned, Pilgrim's Progress by the Puritan writer John Bunyan, and from there I the algorithm basically, just funneled other Reformed writers and content in my direction, and so I began learning a good deal, and listening to a lot of sermons from the Puritan and Reformed part of church history, and have been greatly blessed. I mentioned paradigm shifts along the way, just major changes of perspective that came upon me, that I wasn't unable to unsee, and they changed the way I made decisions, the way that I saw life, and emboldened me in the way that I was going. And so, it's out of Puritan and Reformed, teaching and doctrine that, I really learned about the inner man, and the kind of the spiritual, the spiritual warfare. That term is so used here. It's just worn out to me, but for the lack of better term, the spiritual warfare, the mortifying the flesh, and so, that stuff I had not heard before, and even growing up in church, and at the church that I was attending presently, only would hear small allusions to, we'd hear the term spiritual warfare, and someone in Bible study or something would mention, use the term inner man, or stuff like that, and or mortification and everything, but in Bible studies, they just, terms like that just kind of stood as big theological terms that people like to use and stuff. So I hadn't heard as in depth a treatment on just that part of the human being, and that part of the walk. And I understand a lot of the strongest and weightiest Puritan preachings and substance come happen during times where the author or the place where they lived, or was undergoing a hard time, and either economically or natural disasters or plague or famine, or persecution, right, or just different things. Um, so needless to say, mature, robust inner reflection, devotion, searching after the truth of the scriptures, to lay hold on the promises, and to resist sin, resist the evil one. That is just a weightiness of it that I didn't really see around me, and I myself didn't have. I didn't have the weightiness that I encountered from that content. It came to me, and it challenged me. It made more than challenged, because that just sounds like it challenged me to really, like, I didn't I didn't come up to the challenge in any way, shape, or form, as it appears in my mind and things like that. So from Puritan Reformed teaching, the term providence, or coram deo, both those. Coram deo, living before the face of God, is a Latin term that it talks about living as though we are living before God's face, like, they would say, God is watching you, and yeah, that's a simplistic way to say that, but yeah, living, just the understanding and the recognition daily and continually that you live under God's gaze, as it were, and so and the implications of it, and this gaze is not just looking at your deeds, but your heart and your inner man. Yeah. So, but another term is providence. The Puritans, believed that everything that happened, every circumstance that befell, was providence. That as creatures, we exist under either God's left hand of providence or his right hand of dispensing, right, miracle or special deliverance, or a special act of power, but that the things that take place in the everyday are also just as administered by God, and according to his watch care, wisdom, and loving kindness, and zeal for the perfecting of our inner man, for to his glory above all. So that was taught, and that was understood, that was recognized, and so generations of people lived with this understanding, and when I've heard and read treatments on providence, the term that was used was this abandoning yourself to God's providence, as opposed to the exercise of wrongful prudence, manly earthly prudence, and resting upon those things. And so my circumstances at the time when that came to me, when I started learning about those things, it was my circumstances were in such a way that I I was just kind of at this place where I was at I had before me the task of building. I didn't have anything, much like now. Well, anyways, yes, much like now. Stuff not not having anything. I don't even believe. Yes, I did have a job, but yeah, and I was paying rent somewhere, and that was and that was about it. But I had this, had this son who had come into the world, and I had just these thoughts of all the things that I need to do in order to be be ready, prepared to be a dad, to be a father, and stuff. So I had all that before me. So I was in such a way where I was just standing before this big undertaking that I was kind of moving towards trying to tackle, not knowing how. And so when this came to me, and it was kind of a slow process. I had heard a little bit here, kind of a little bit there. Even actually before even coming into to encountering Puritan content, just preachers that were on the local radio were saying things that they didn't use the word providence all the time. Maybe one of them did, but anyways, that's just understanding of how you surrender your life to God, and you surrender your like Alistair Begg would say. He would say, just trust God and leave the consequences to Him, like with your life, with your everything. Just trust God and leave the consequences to Him. And they would use the verses of worry not for tomorrow. The passages speaking about the sparrow, and just reminding of God's God's watch care. So I had this new understanding that I was armed with, and as I was endeavoring to also understand how to be a light in the marketplace, and how that even at your job, you're still operating in the kingdom. God's providence is still at work. There are ways for you to come apart and be separate, even in your workplace, with the way that with everything, the way that you talk, the way that you work, the way that you are with with monies and things and things like that. I even had at that time in my mind, when I was just reading in the New Testament, where John the Baptist is talking to the Roman soldiers, and they were newly converted and baptized, and so they were asking basically what? So now what? They were asking how do we now live? And so John said to the soldiers to to something about anyway, something about I think being like gentleness, but and being content with their wages. I forget the other one, but I'll put it up on the screen when I find it. But yeah, being content with your wages. You know, what an interesting thing for him to say to these mercenary, basically individuals who were likely, felt underpaid, and that in times past that offset showed and trickled down in the way that they dealt with the public, or just in ways where they didn't do their duty in the way which was right. So yeah, I had understandings like that in my mind also, about how it's important that the people of God, as we are trusting in God for our providence, that it shows in our the way it was put in another sermon that I heard, that we're not solicitous. We're not as solicitous as our neighbors who aren't trusting in God's providence. They are, the dollar, they're earning the next dollar, or they're earning the exact amount that they see is needed, is the most important thing, drive of their day. All their energy is and their emotion is put into this, because in their minds, there is no other provision except for their what they can extract through their labor, or whatever means. And so they're solicitous. They're about that money. They're after the bag, and as children trusting in the providence of God, we are less solicitous. Puritan writers used a lot of big terms, big words and stuff. Actually, my vocabulary has somewhat been helped by the challenging task of reading some of these books and following along with how just with how they structured their words and things. So I lived for a while. I lived courageously, and in this way, I was in agreement with it. I was perceiving it. I was seeing it in action. I was trusting in it. I was excited to see just how things would go. And like I said, I was paying rent. I was I was living during the early years encompassed. I lived in a hotel. One time for 7 months. I lived in a hotel for 7 months, and it was an expensive hotel. I think it was $1,000 a month. It was $1,000 a month, that a square round amount, that it ended up being. And I was paying it by the week or by the day. I was paying it in all these different kind of ways, because this is where I was living there for 7 months, and I was working at an S&B burger joint and waiting tables, and I believe that was the only job I had at the time. And when I think about it, even now, I have no idea how I did not, get kicked out of there. I might be forgetting maybe a day that I had to sleep somewhere else because I didn't have the money and stuff, and maybe I got back in there when I did have the money and something like that. But from what I remember, the whole 7 month period, there weren't any lapses in my staying there. So and I was just making tips, paying $1,000 a month, and I was still I guess I was eating. My food was largely taken care of at the restaurant that I worked and everything, and maybe I didn't have a whole lot of other outgoes because I'm not having a car and not having to pay for a phone and things like that. So there were, um, there were those things that I can, that yeah, I can logically kind of break down and say, well, yeah, with all that stuff, I can see, $1,000 a month is doable even on one thing. But um, I was it wasn't until um, yeah, really this place where I work now that thing really stood out. At least as far as my because to be honest, I actually forget during that period that I was living there, um, how much maybe stress or whatever pressure I felt about it. I honestly do. I can't say that I recall. I can't say that I was there that whole 7 months and it didn't and I wasn't like really really trying to get it. To be honest, yeah, I do have kind of trouble remembering kind of exactly those details, but the circumstances though were those and stuff. But the job I work now, Jimmy John's, I can more clearly remember, just especially with the competitive dynamic, um, not being noticing when as how I began to stop being kind of irked and the kind of stuff that happens when you see somebody like take an order, or that you could have and probably even should have taken, or you see someone else, you see your coworker make a whole bunch of money in a day where when you haven't made any money and stuff, and just all the kind of stuff that comes to mind that really can, and it's discouraged, it's discouraged many people who have come in to deliver. It's discouraged many of them into quitting within the first week or couple of weeks. So it's a real thing that's experienced where you're in this environment and you see all these people making all this money and they're just grabbing all these orders and you're not leaving anything for you, and you're really having to try to you're really having to try to figure out how to make something of your delivery day. It really was like that without the dispatcher. That was part of the reason why we even got the dispatcher for that short period of time that we had one. And so, but I noticed, I was able to notice a decrease in my angst regarding it, to where I remember often when I'd be at the close to the end of the shift, and it was pretty certain that I wasn't going to make a whole very much money. All the tips I was getting were either write-ins where anyways, that's another thing, but there were write-ins that a lot of times amount to not being a tip, and then other ones that were just no tip, and and having to riding the bike, and sometimes it's being hot, it's hot and everything. So all the stuff that would make that are just a perfect kind of almost a perfect storm of making someone want to grumble and complain about not making tips. I lived and experienced a real pacification, a real calming of my heart and spirit in that regard, to the point to where I remember just yeah, really just even if I don't make any money today, if I just ride my bike, I knew I had this, I knew that my needs were going to be taken care of, whether yeah, and whether it was rent, right, or really, I guess just rent and food, or if something happened, with my bike or some kind of emergency that I need to pay for, just being able to keep kind of the bare minimum going. And I was in conversations with different people during that time where, they would bring up that point about how just my incorrect understanding of what they thought was my incorrect understanding of just kind of that whole picture, because they would say things like, well, God actually does, he desires more from us than just our the kind of the bare minimum for living and stuff, and he desires for us to be able to be a blessing to others and to be able to help others, and so we need to do more than trust, than simply just trusting God for our yes, we trust him for our base needs, they would say, but we're supposed to trust him for more, or they would sometimes even say that, but basically alluding to the fact that, like, well, yeah, but you're just, it could be because I wasn't making a lot of money, so it did, and I guess it can stand to question if that's enough. I didn't mean to touch on I guess get into a portion that to where I probably hear it in my voice where the extent of the deconstruction, I guess, that I've experienced in these recent days, the extent to which it has gone to where I felt more able to defend how that was enough, and how that this whole thing of more than that is some new thought, that's come in, and that's not the way that the saints of God were instructed at the beginning to be, and so and I defended it more heartily, and I can still defend that's what the scriptures teach. Man, I'm getting into something I didn't even really intend to get into, and I'll say it by a statement that I agree now. I do see that the way it's an apocalyptic faith. It's an apocalyptic religion. The spirit that came from the core teachings that comes that Christianity has added onto, those core teachings are ones that it's telling you to separate yourself and to come away from the earth, because you're going to be leaving the earth soon. The ending is coming soon. This return of Christ and the ending of all things is coming soon, even before the ending of this present generation. That was the understanding that was the understanding that was in the minds of the first people of the way. And so this earth held Christianity that exists now, where it's this expect him anytime but live like he's not. There's been supposed comings, returns of Christ over and over again since the beginning, and we're still here. And so it began this more earthbound kind of Christianity, where we're believing in Jesus, we're believing in the coming back. We're supposed to say that it's soon, because that's what the scriptures say. But we live in a way that reflects the opposite of that. And that has been, and that thought in several different ways has come over into that core faith, and different things also have happened, but to where now we have this kind of this earthbound kind of Christianity that it doesn't fit. It doesn't if someone if someone even begins to go further, which in church they'll tell you, well, you're going be careful, you're going past the gospel, you're going beyond the gospel in what you're trying to dig into. But if you go further than that, and you go in and you're conforming yourself to what you are discovering, yes, it does bring you into an apocalyptic end of world mind. It does. I guess in that I'm saying that well, yeah, I understood it squarely as it's supposed to be, and yes, I guess that is what I'm saying. I was given that understanding. I still say that I was given that understanding. I didn't just understand it because of any particular smarts, but it was something that I was given because as the scriptures also say, if you seek it, you'll find it. I'm already hearing. Anyways, I already know the other ways that you seek it, you find it. Can kind of go in a left direction, and can be used against me because yes, I also recognize it in the same way. There's this thing where if you believe something hard enough, you'll begin to see it, and it'll begin reinforcing itself in in everything. And so even if it's untrue, you'll begin seeing it everywhere. That's how people get themselves into negative thought patterns and things like that. So I do understand that it's a double-edged sword. That if you seek it, find it. So getting back to the story, yeah, kind of living in that. I'm experiencing that, having and really in other ways than just that. Just experiencing this superintendence, along with a kind of communication. I've never claimed to hear God's voice, but I would claim to have experienced what came to me in an informational kind of way, that it came to me in a way which developed up into a thought or a word or an idea, something that I could see and see it working. I don't intend. I don't intend necessarily to get into so much testimony stuff. I do want to, whatever. I guess I do want to get into that, but not at this time. Part of what makes this project difficult is that I have gone so many years not doing this, not putting flags down to kind of mark my way, by way of either I have sparse journaling, not very consistent journaling. I've had the thought to do these podcasts years ago, and just never got started, and so whenever I would think about finally getting it started, one of the things that would hinder me further was just, gosh, man, there's so much back story to behind the person who's speaking now, to where, especially to the people who the people like my family, my mom and dad, there are people who I'm really desirous for them to understand what's happened with me, because I haven't really talked about it. I've just been kind of living in this way, and with all this stuff going on inside, and yeah, and like yeah, people not and yeah, they're having a hard time. The people I care about having a hard time kind of understanding, just exactly what it is that I'm doing. So and so I'm not going to do the whole testimony part right here, but just there are so many other instances where the superintendents that I would talk about, which which leads me into, I guess, just for a short minute, well, just the whole idea of one's subjective experience, and how it's become a thing in in Christianity, that when you're evangelizing and you're sharing the gospel, that the focus should be more on the gospel and the text of scripture and what's said in the scripture than your own subjective experience, because of how misleading and confusing and maybe even dead wrong someone's subjective experience might be. And so telling new people that you're wanting to convert, about talking to them in that way isn't recommended, and stuff. I do understand it. I do understand it. I understand why. But I have come to understand that it comes to a time where, especially with the implications of what the scripture's trying to say about how this thing that takes place with one when they are saved, that this indwelling life, this indwelling person comes to your life, comes and dwells inside of you, and integrates into you with your spirit, and vitalizes your body and your mind, and teaches and instructs and begins transforming you into the likeness of God's dear Son. And so it's a personal, it's a relationship, not a religion, as it said. That's the understanding that everyone is always that everyone's supposed to have. No Christian would tell you that it's not really a personal relationship. And so if that's the case, when certain things happen to put into question the validity of that experience, all you have left really seems like all you have left really is almost the, I don't know if I'm saying this right, almost you have the experience itself to defend against the accusations of the false experience, and that seems very circular. I will I guess an analogy, or if I can use an analogy, is, maybe I've heard this this analogy used, but just where one comes upon an individual whom they have a relationship for whatever period of time. Imagine it being a person who's traveling across the world and meets a fellow traveler, and they go some time in their travels together, and they experience many different things about one about the other, see them in different lights, and then they're, and this relationship, this time that of this relationship, the capacity doesn't matter, but the time of the relationship was impactful and meaningful and life altering. It changed them. This person, added something to their life that they'd never be the same after having separated. And so then people come after some time, after having separated ways with this friend, and you're living in the memories of it. People come to you and begin telling you that person doesn't exist. Everything good about the person, that some of which you experienced, none of it was true, they say. And instead, this person is actually this kind of person, bad person. And so this is what everyone's telling you. You're stupid, you're a fool, or you're deluded. That person, that person got to you. You've been worked over. You have some sick need to be, whatever, as to why you hold on to this imaginary relationship, and stuff. And so you hear this, and as you're away from the group, and you're contemplating on this barrage of insults, the memories. What happens is little memories of that time and the experience and the things and the different lights that you saw the person in. Those memories kind of begin to come, and even if you begin to question some of those memories, you're not going to question them all. I mean, and so they will. See, that's the thing. Anyways, you won't question them all. Some might. That's what I would refer to as a throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And deny, and then actually coming into this denial of real denial of what might have been the realest experience one might ever have. And so you would turn against it, and you would enter into, and what it looks to me is like some kind of realm of perpetual unreality, and where you're just, what then? What, and it's so anyways, that's some of the thought of why I guess I myself wouldn't, I don't say now that there's no God. I don't say that. I don't say there's no God. I am allowing myself to say things, I guess, less I'm allowing myself to say things less not attempting to play the devil's advocate, but I'm feeling out. I guess I'm feeling out. I have to. I haven't done this, and it's late. It is late in the game of doing it. It's just I don't have to know everything and stuff. So, and I don't have to dogmatically defend something that I can say that I don't, that I don't know. That's a big thing that that I'm coming away from, is just understanding that I don't have to do that. Um, so, but with regards to Providence and my testified experience of it, and how I can also talk about how that has begun to change, and even I kind of remember when it began to change a little bit, um, where I just started yeah, I just started, you know I needed to make more money, and and yeah, I was not totally convinced that the direction that I was going was good, because yeah, the world isn't ending, and I mean, if you're whoever's followed along so far, you kind of understand. It's like yeah, circumstantially following that line of thought, one will end up homeless. So and I understand. Yeah, I understood that. I called myself kind of staring it right in the face, kind of courageously, and feeling that is um, the way that I'm to go, that I'm supposed to go, and I don't think that anymore. But for those who are wondering, yeah, it that is yeah that is where, not for everyone, but that is where kind of that. I mean, how can it not? How can the understanding of of Providence, and especially in the light of the imminence of God's return, Christ's return, and the deceitfulness of having our hearts fixed in the earth, and yeah, so it is something that when it's understood, the spirit of the letter is one that you're preparing, as it says, we have here no abiding city. But we seek a better country, a better one. Um, a heavenly one. The early ones of the way, they were pilgrims in the earth. They lived and they acted that way. And so I don't it's that's the reason why this present thing, it just doesn't feel right. And when it's looked into, it's clearly a misshaped peg and hole situation. And and it's been and like, yeah, the same thing. If you try to force the wrong shaped peg into the wrong shaped hole, hammer it in there. You're either gonna dull it. You're either gonna put gouges into the rod peg, or you're gonna bend and misshape the edges of the hole. You know, so it's so with Providence though, man. Anyways, I think I'm gonna wrap it up from here. This kind of an abrupt ending. If I figure out if I figure out how to connect on to this, I will, and if not, I'll just leave it like this, and I'll continue on in the next podcast. But feel free to comment on just how Providence and your understanding of it, how it has impacted your life, and if and if it's something that you can say that you've abandoned, you lived in an abandon to the providence of God, and what that was like, how that worked, and maybe if you heard something of a misunderstanding of on my part of Providence, to comment. I know I kind of said a lot there. I am going to try to get better at reducing all the ums and pauses and stuff. But thanks for your patience. And we will do some more thinking on the next cast. Bye for now.